Well, we're really excited to have you here tonight. And before we kick off into your slides, I had a couple questions to get things started. You know, if you haven't been to campus in a while, we've got I know we have a couple of people on tonight that are one's from Pennsylvania, and then we got another from Colorado, so all over the country. But if you haven't been to campus in a while, there are sculptures now populating and all over campus. So tell us when that started. And how it
Well,
started.
so they started essentially when I did. I came to Lander in the fall of 2010, and the first thing that I noticed when I came on campus was that there was no artwork out for public display. We had a gallery, and the gallery was showing a lot of student work and maybe some other professional work that came in, but outside the doors, there was nothing. And so one of the first things I wanted to do was to try to work on fixing that whenever I came. So really, we began in 2010. It took us a while to kind of build up the student work and then the sculptures that would be fit to go outside. But around maybe 7 years ago, we started in earnest with a goal of creating 50 sculptures on campus, all made by students.
Wow. So how many do we have today?
We today, currently, like right now, we either have 49 or 50.
Okay. And then how is a student's sculpture selected and juried, if you will, and placed on campus?
Well, what we do is really interesting. We've built this public sculpture program into our curriculum. And so within our department, one of the things that we are geared towards with all of our art students is that we're career minded. And so the way that a student would get a sculpture placed on campus is modeled after the way that a student would get a sculpture placed out in the real world. So what they would do is they would begin with a sketch, and they would design it. They would build an artist statement, and then they would build an entire digital proposal. And so this proposal would list the artist statement, any sort of information that might be important for the public to know, safety information, how the sculpture will be maintained, and then it'll provide sketches or digital images that show the work in its place. And so then that goes through an approval process, usually with me, sometimes with the president's cabinet, and then we move on from there.
So you mentioned there's 50. Is there room to grow, or are you planning on growing?
Yes. So the idea is that once we reach 50, the next goal is 100. So okay. I assume next week we're well on our way towards that goal.
All right. And last question before you get started. I've worked at a couple other campuses where sculpture has been a big part of that, or there's a few. So what campuses do this well, and what are your long-term goals?
Well, I think a lot of campuses, their major approach is to show professional grade artwork. And so one of the differences that we have here is that ours is completely student-centered, and it is about our students' education. And so that is our first check on the list, is to make sure that it's serving our students first. There are Ivy League schools that do public sculpture well, and there are schools in South Carolina who do an okay job of showing sculpture. A lot of what you're going to see when you go to a campus might be related to sports. It might be their mascot or something like that. But our work is unique in that it is designed into our program.
Oh, that's great. Well, without further ado, kick us off.
Okay, great. Well, so I have some slides for you. I'll go ahead and show you the first slide there. So I am an artist. I'm a two-dimensional and three-dimensional artist. And that means that I really enjoy drawing, and I also really enjoy making things out of steel. And so some of the drawings that are on the screen now, these are some of my more recent drawings. I created all of these drawings during the past year. During the pandemic year, I decided to use the time that I had at home for creative work. And so I made, I think just between either 23 or 24 new drawings in the last year, and turned that into a body of work that was about the pandemic, about being away from people that we love, missing people, maybe wanting to hug someone for the first time in a long time. And my work is kind of like me. It's sort of an extension of who I am and how I interact with the world. And so it's colorful, it's a little silly, it's funny, and it deals with maybe some cartoon imagery, and it deals with it in a way that's maybe easier for us to take. And so one of the approaches that I have with my students is that I use humor in the classroom, because very often it's tough to take really harsh, really honest feedback about something that you've invested a lot of time in. And so by using a little bit of sugar with that, sometimes I'm able to lessen the blow on the student and get them to maybe accept the feedback a little bit more. And so I do that with my work as well. I also really enjoy making sculptures, and these are a couple of sculptures that I have made recently. The sculptures that I make are steel sculptures, and that is one of the things that helps me in my interest in being a public sculptor. I learned how to weld when I was 7, and that's not just a silly part of my bio. That's actually true. My dad was a welding instructor at our vocational school in our school district, and so he knew how to weld, and he liked to weld after school, after work. And he didn't make artwork, but he needed somebody that could either hold something really heavy or somebody who could weld it while he held something really heavy. And so my brothers were older than me and smarter than me, and they knew when to get out of the house. And that left me being a 7-year-old learning how to weld so that my dad could hold the heavy stuff. So I became his indentured servant, and I still, I worked with him all the way up until his death in 2012. And so these are just some small things that I started to do over the past few years. My work 3-dimensionally is similar to my work 2-dimensionally. It still has the bright colors. It still has some cartoon imagery. Everything is bright. Everything's a little bit funny, a little bit on the humorous side. And one of the things that I really enjoy is taking something like steel that we normally associate with maybe construction or things like that, and turning it into something that's lighthearted, fun, and maybe even looks a little bit like bubblegum. And let's see. Okay, so here we go. When I came to Lander in 2010, as I said, I noticed that there were not any sculptures on campus, and that was one of the things that was of a great interest to me at the time. I had been doing public sculpture work in steel for, I guess, probably 10 years up to that point, and it was something I'd had a lot of success in, and so I wanted to bring that to Lander, and I wanted to be able to teach that to my students. Our art program at Lander in 2010 was just beginning to grow. We were sort of revamping all the things that we were teaching and the way that we were teaching things. And we really were in the midst of beginning to change the program at that time. And so one of the things I wanted to do was teach a form of building and sculpting called hollow form sculpting. And the image that you're looking at now was created by Megan D'Angelo Vickery. She is a Greenwood resident right now. She has her own photography business. She's one of our proud graduates. She decided that she wanted to learn this process, and she was one of the first students who really embraced it. Hollow form building is essentially building things out of steel the way you would think about a cardboard box. If you think about it being hollow on the inside and only having outside edges. With steel, you weld those edges together, and then to create really interesting forms, you grind away all the weld so that you can't really tell how it's put together. And so when you look at my work and when you look at work like this, there's been so many hours spent grinding and making this thing look like it's made out of something other than steel. And that's one of the things that can be really mystifying about the material. With I think all the images that I'm going to show you are my personal images or images that I've gotten from our campus photographer, Laura Brown. They all feature our students. And that is one of the things that's most important to me about this work, is that every work that you're going to see on Lander's campus was created by one of our students. Very often these students created these works in their first semester or their first year of taking art classes. Some of them have taken 2 or 3 art classes in the work that you're going to see. But most of this work is very much beginner work. And it's work that's really interesting to me and makes me really proud, because I can see how excited and proud the students are of their work. And you can see that in this image. This is one of our students who graduated a few years ago, Sabrina Sullivan. She created 3 of these yoga figures that are still currently on display on campus. And she did this by combining what she was learning 2-dimensionally with what she knew 3-dimensionally. And so she took a drawing process that was a continuous line drawing, where you would put your pencil down on the piece of paper and never pick it up. And she traced that with steel lines and made the 3-dimensional sketch of her drawings. And here we have Rami Locke. Rami Locke decided to work sort of in a theme during a semester. And in her ceramics class, she made some spider web things that really pushed the material and pushed her use of the material and her technique. And she decided she wanted to do the same thing with steel. And so she decided to take the steel and make it look almost as fragile as one of those really tiny, wispy spider webs that you'll see sometimes in the morning dew. And we use things that are not just steel. This is two views of the same work by one of our very recent graduates, Nick Spitzer. I believe Nick might actually be in this Zoom meeting somewhere. This is a really, really strong sculpture that is still outside the Pease building right now. It is made of concrete slab that's reinforced with steel, and then it has this steel crutch that kind of holds it up. And it's very secure. Of course, it looks a little bit tenuous. It looks like something you wouldn't want to kind of stand under, but really great sculpture and an experiment in figuring out things that we could use other than steel outside. And that tends to be one of the things that students are always interested in when they think about using materials for outdoor work. They always want to know, what can we use? And the answer to that question usually is, I don't know, let's see. I'm very big into experiential learning. And so I don't want to tell students the answers to questions. And so it's always best if they go on a process of discovery. And so one of the things that they'll do is that they'll start sketching and start drawing and thinking with me about, how can I make this something that will go outside? So this student, Dylan Watts, was a ceramics student mostly. He was very interested in ceramic work. And in his last year, he decided that he wanted to spend some time working with steel and figuring out how to put those two materials together. Now, it can be really tough to combine two materials that are really solid and really hard like that. And so he came up with his own technique of layering these pieces together almost like tiles, and then using things like epoxy to put the steel and the ceramic work together. We have a piece out by one of our new residence halls called Achieve. This one was made out of concrete. And what this student did was he created this elaborate concrete slab mold that showcased some of his graphic design work. And so he built the word Achieve and placed it in a spot where students would be able to interact with it all the time. And so he created this bench that you can go and sit on. And it's a bench that's going to remind you of what you can do while you are here. We also have these. I think if you've been to campus in the last little while, you've probably seen these. These are paper cranes, origami cranes, except these are made out of 10 gauge steel. They're very heavy. It was very much a learning process for Daisha to figure out how to make the steel do this and look and act like paper. And she had this idea completely on her own. This was something that she wanted to do. And she wanted to take that heavy material and transform it into something that looked like it could just float away on the wind. A lot of the work that students provide for our campus are from ideas that they generated completely on their own. And most of them have some element of inspiration attached to them. They understand that their audience is a person who's going to be on the campus of a university. So they might be students, they might be former students, they might be prospective students, or they might just be community members who are coming to an event. And so they always look for the opportunity to communicate something with their work. And so they're learning about process, they're learning about the material, they're learning about sculpture in general, but they're also learning about how to begin to communicate their ideas to the general public. One of the things that work like this does for us, of course, for the students, it's about the education first. It's about what they're going to get out of this experience. But as you can see in a lot of these, the students look very proud. The students look very happy when these things are installed. It is quite an achievement to finish something like this and have it installed and be able to step back and look that, hey, I made that thing. Students feel very empowered. You might notice that a lot of the students in these images are female. For whatever reason, 80 to 90% of my advanced students tend to be females. And so the welding that you're seeing, the hammering that you're seeing, the power tools that people will hear whenever they go by the sculpture studio, most of the time you're going to find that there's a female behind one of those and making this work that people are in awe of on campus. So it empowers students. It also beautifies our campus. We have some things like this that, you know, at first glance, it just seems like a really pretty thing. It's school colors. It was very well thought out composition and design. But again, there's a meaning behind this. This relates to a person that this particular student lost to suicide while she was in high school. And so this is a way of her remembering that and then sharing those types of connections with other students who might be walking across campus and understand that the butterfly is a symbol of that sort of loss. So we're empowering students, we're beautifying the campus. We're also attracting students. I've had many students come to me at open house events and tours that we've given, and they've told me how much it meant to them to be able to come to a campus and see that it was not only artwork on campus, but it was student artwork. Many of the students that I have now actually told me that it factored into their choice of where to go to school because they could see the artwork on campus and they could envision that being their artwork one day. And so it gave them something to strive to. And it also gives us reasons to return to campus. This is, in my opinion, a reason for all of us to return to campus at some point in the near future. This sculpture was installed last November. It was made by a student named Victor Santos. And Victor is the kind of person who is extremely curious and extremely stubborn. And that's the kind of person that makes a great sculptor. He had this idea that he wanted a sculpture that would change as you walked past it. And so I had seen things like this before. My mind does not work this way. And so I kind of patted him on the back and told him good luck. I would help him any way I could, but this was beyond me. And so he did a lot of very, very, very strange calculating, a lot of things that I would consider to be backwards thinking. And he ended up with this thing, and you just have to imagine, since this is not a video, when you walk past the sculpture from left to right or right to left, the sculpture doesn't move, but your perspective of the way he used the sculpture and the steel changes from showing you the image of a single eagle to a school of fish. And it will mesmerize you walking from one side, one view to the other. It is absolutely amazing. I love it. So we have reasons like this to be able to return to campus, knowing that next semester, actually in about 2 months, we're going to be putting out some new stuff. There'll be 3 or 4 new sculptures out on campus that you can see. Some of them are really big. Some of them are sculptures that you can see from a long way away, and they kind of have become a centerpiece for a certain part of campus. Others are sort of tucked away. And so there are sculptures that you would really have to go on a hunt to find, almost like a little scavenger hunt. And if you know that there are 50 sculptures out, I've had students go out, try to find all 50, and they've come really close. But you can't always find all of them. So there's always something just around the next corner or just under the next tree. And so it makes it a lot of fun. We have also, I think I have one more slide here for you. We have a new initiative, and the new initiative is called Adopt a Sculpture. This is something that we are looking into to provide a way for our alumni to be involved in the sculpture that is currently on campus and that will be coming on campus as well. So for an adoption fee, you would be able to adopt a sculpture, put your name on it. We'll have a small sign that will be made to indicate the artist, the title, and then the person who has helped us to adopt it. And what that will do is it will help to provide the signage for the work, but it also helps to maintain the work. So these are what I would consider to be long-term temporary exhibits of sculpture. And sculpture always is going to need something. It's always going to start to deteriorate or come apart at some point. And we want to be able to keep these things in good condition for our students for many years to come. I would love it if the sculptures that you've seen in these slides today, if the students who created those sculptures were able to come back in 10 or 20 years and say, hey, my work is still here. I have a sculpture that's on the front campus of the school where I went to undergrad. And that is something that I'm so proud of, and it's something that I look for every time I go to that campus. And I think that would be a great thing for our students here as well. So those are my slides. That's sort of the brief history of how we got to where we are. I do have to say that the reason that we have sculpture on campus at Lander right now is not because of me. Anyone can teach someone how to weld, and anyone can teach people how to stick things in the ground. The reason that we have sculpture at Lander outside so people can see it right now is because of our current president, Rich Cosentino. Dr. Cosentino has been extremely generous with us. He has encouraged us to put as many things as we possibly can here on campus. He's given us basically free range to do whatever we want to do. And he's been very supportive, even sponsoring in many years a first, second, and third place from the proposals that are given to him. So our students will provide proposals, they'll install the work, and then he'll go in and pick some winners. each year. And so it's great to have that sort of support. It's great to have the freedom to be able to do these things with the campus and to make the situation better for all of us.
That's great, Doug. Thank you. We have a couple questions that have been hopefully a couple more will percolate here. But the first question was, do the students do their own welding?
Absolutely. I weld for no one. Yeah, we teach the students to weld. We have a sort of a spiraling curriculum where at one level they learn how to do a simple tack weld, a spot weld. The next level they learn how to do seams. And then the next levels after that, they're basically learning how to take away that weld. So they learn how to put the weld on, and then they learn how to grind it off.
Have any of the sculptures been purchased by passerbys?
Let's see. That's actually a good question. There's a sculpture on campus now that I have a person who works here who asks me at least once a year if they can buy that sculpture. And right now the answer is not yet, but maybe one day. I do know that students have taken their work. Some students who really just didn't want to leave it very long. Once they graduated, they came and they got their work, and they have since either put it in shows and or sold it.
You just answered our next question. Was some of them are now gone, and somebody commented that they loved the French fry that was out there, but that is not there any longer.
Yes, I also love the French fries.
When I worked in East Carolina, I know that the sculpture park, for lack of a better word, had become very attractive to folks, and they were coming off. I-95 was 45 miles away, and they were coming off the freeway to see the sculpture in East Carolina. So it is a good way to get the community on campus, and not only our own Greenwood and Abbeville community, but even farther away. So,
exactly. Yes, and that is also a part of the future goals that I have. Not only to just increase the number of sculptures on campus, but to also begin to create a budget where we can bring in professional sculptors. This is a way of, again, serving our students. If we can bring in with some sort of honorarium, bring in a professional sculptor, have him display one or two of his pieces or her pieces for a period of like 11 or 12 months. We can tie that in with a workshop. We can tie it in with coming around and doing studio visits, and them giving feedback and interacting with our students at the same time.
So the next question is, has there been any thought of interior work like mobiles in the atriums?
Yeah, and we've done some of that in the past. We had a very interesting, I guess mobile would be the way to describe it, a hanging sculpture in the science building in their big stairwell there, with a biology student, and she was actually pre-dental, and her friend who was the art student who did a lot of casting. And what they did was they created basically a history and a prediction of the evolution of teeth in the human mouth. And so they had casts that were taken from early skulls. They had casts that were taken from their mouths, and then they predicted what the casts would look like in the future. And so there were hundreds of these mouth casts that were hanging down, sort of kind of raining down through that stairwell.
Well, that's cool. So the next question, and this slide may answer the question I'm thinking, what is currently the largest sculpture on campus?
The largest sculpture on campus is, I think now it's 15 feet tall. The sunflowers in the image on the screen there, they stood at 12 feet. They were the tallest there for a good period of time. But I do believe now that there is one that is 15 feet tall.
We're having a fire. I had to mute. Such is life in the COVID era. Hold on, we got another question. Do your students come in wanting to do sculpture, or are they drawn to it after taking classes? That's a little bit of a pun.
Well, both now, actually. Earlier, and a few years ago, I would have told you that no one wants to be a sculptor. No one comes to school and says, you know what, I'm going to major in sculpture. But now that's actually not true anymore. I usually have students who will come in just in any art degree. they're going to come in with their interest level based on what they've received positive reinforcement for in the past. And so if you think about what high schools teach and you think about what, any sort of good pre-college education is going to teach you, they're probably not going to have a lot of sculptural experience whenever they come in. And so the students don't come in knowing how to weld or understanding how fun that is or how cool that is, and really not knowing a lot about sculpture. And so what a lot of students do is they come in and they take a sculpture class because they have to. It's part of their degree. And that's when they start to realize, oh my gosh, there's this whole other way of making artwork that I never really even tried before. And so a good number of students then fall into it and just love it.
So as we wind down here, personal question for me: what's your favorite sculpture park in the country?
Well,
I lived in St. Louis for a while, so Lowmeyer was literally in my backyard, and I lived in the city, so I went up to Storm King a few times.
Yeah, I would probably say Storm King. Yeah.
Well, as we draw down to a close here, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and certainly want to thank Doug for sharing what these things that have been populating our campus over the last decade are and will, and certainly we would entertain offers to sell them. I bet the students would. But I also want to echo what Doug said about the Adopt a Sculpture program. We just kicked this off. The website conveniently went live about 5 minutes ago. So there's more information on that. We didn't select all 50 sculptures to kick it off. I think we selected 80. So 8. Sorry, 8. So we selected 8. So please, we'll send everybody the link. But also wanted to highlight one last thing about Doug and the sculpture program. During homecoming, which is a plug for homecoming, we are meeting on Saturday, February 12th at 10 a.m. in front of Jackson Library, where the Starbucks is, for a sculpture walk that will be socially distanced. And Doug is going to lead us through a walk that day to talk a little bit more and show us about the sculptures. I'm sure get a little more hands-on feel that morning. So we're excited about that and looking forward to that. And we'll send in addition to the Adopt a Sculpture program, we will send the sculpture walk information as well to everyone. So again, we thank everybody for joining us tonight on alumni webinar, and we're gonna take a couple weeks off to get prepared for homecoming, and we certainly hope those that can join us for a very outdoors and a very socially distanced homecoming. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Linda Neely love. Made a comment. That's good.
Doug, they said you were a very good teacher and love the art on campus. Those were 2 of the chats that came in there at the end.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. And Lisa said, fabulous, thank you. And then so good job. Thanks. Appreciate it. And certainly look forward to seeing you on the 16th.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
You see Larry Curley in the